The gods ran, not one god, all of them. Zeus fled, Hera fled. Apollo, Aphrodite, Ares, every name on every temple in Greece ran from a single creature moving toward Olympus. They fled to Egypt, disguised themselves as animals, and hid. This is not a metaphor. This is what the Greeks believed happened before their own mythology became safe. Before we discuss what Typhon was, understand what that image means. The world order you know as Greek mythology almost did not survive the day he appeared. The Titans had ruled for an age before Zeus ended them. The war that destroyed them lasted 10 years, a span the Greeks treated as geological fact rather than legend, and it was fought between the Titans of the old order and the Olympians of the new. Zeus and his siblings, released from Cronus's stomach, armed with thunderbolts from the Cyclopes and the 100-handed giants they freed from the pit below the world. Against Cronus, against Atlas, against Hyperion and Iapetus, and all the forces of the age that had come before. When Zeus won, he did not negotiate. He dropped the Titans into Tartarus, the deepest structure in existence, below the underworld, below Hades, below anything that had a geography. In Hesiod's account, a bronze anvil dropped from the surface would fall 9 days and 9 nights before reaching Tartarus. That is where Zeus put the Titans, and he sealed the entrance behind them. Gaia was their mother. She was also the oldest thing in the cosmos. Not a goddess in the Olympian sense, but the Earth's own capacity to generate and to respond. She had, depending on which account you follow, even provided Zeus with the means to overthrow Cronus in the first place. She had her own purposes, and they did not include accepting permanent Olympian supremacy without a counterweight. When Zeus sealed the Titans, Gaia made a decision. She made Typhon. He was born in the Corinthian cave in Cilicia, modern-day Turkey, approximately 700 years before the founding of Rome. In a pit the Greeks described as touching the roots of the world. Typhon was the last creature Gaia would ever produce, and she made him with a single function: the cancellation of everything Zeus had built. The descriptions vary between sources because terror resists precise language. In Hesiod's Theogony, written roughly 700 years before Christ, Typhon appears with 100 serpent heads growing from his shoulders, each one giving voice to a different sound. The roar of a lion, the bellow of a bull, the hiss of a serpent, and sounds that had no name in any living language because nothing had produced them before. His lower body was a mass of vipers. Fire poured from his eyes. Some accounts give him a wingspan stretching from horizon to horizon. He was so large that his head pressed against the stars. The anatomy matters less than the intention. Gaia did not make Typhon to negotiate a border with Olympus or to claim a seat at any divine table. She made him to undo the Olympian project entirely, to tear apart the structure Zeus had built and return the cosmos to the state it occupied before any Olympian had a throne. He was not a challenger, he was a demolition. When Typhon turned and moved toward Olympus, the gods saw him coming. Only one turned back. Zeus turned back. The other gods did not. Ovid's Metamorphoses, preserving material centuries older than himself, records the specific forms they took. Zeus, a ram. Hera, a white cow. Aphrodite and Eros, fish. Apollo, a crow. Artemis, a cat. Dionysus, a goat. The entire Olympian court, every deity with a temple and a cult and a priesthood, became livestock in the Nile Delta, while Typhon approached the throne of the world. Only Zeus reversed course. The initial battle is described differently across sources. The version preserving the most archaic material appears in the Bibliotheca, a mythological compendium attributed to the scholar Apollodorus, compiled approximately 2,100 years ago in Alexandria. In that account, Zeus attacked with his thunderbolts and an adamantine sickle, the same metal used at the very beginning of time to unmake Uranos. The Greeks were not being casual about that detail. They were indicating the scale of the threat. It was not enough. Typhon fought from every direction simultaneously. His 100 heads meant 100 independent attacks. Zeus's thunderbolts struck flesh that healed. The adamantine cut, and the wounds closed. And then Typhon did something that nothing else in the Greek mythological record ever accomplished, before that moment or after it. He took Zeus's sinews. The sinews, the tendons and ligaments that constitute the working cables of any body, divine or not, were cut from Zeus's hands and feet and hidden in a bearskin inside a cave in Cilicia, the same landscape where Typhon had been born. The she-dragon Delphine coiled around them as a guard. Without his sinews, Zeus could not move. The lord of Olympus lay in a cave, not dead, not exiled, simply stopped, alive, conscious and unable to function. The Greeks who transmitted this myth preserved something in it they could not fully resolve. The supreme authority of the cosmos had been made helpless by something older than itself. Olympus was not a permanent condition, it was a maintained one. The maintenance had failed. For some span of time, the texts do not specify, Typhon held the sinews and turned his attention toward the empty throne of Olympus. Hermes found Zeus in the cave. He brought Pan with him. Pan produced the sound from which the word panic derives, a sound that the she-dragon Delphine had not encountered in her guard training, a sound belonging to something older than the order she served. In the distraction, Hermes recovered the sinews. He restored them to Zeus. Zeus stood up. The second battle is described as the largest event in the Greek cosmos. Not the Titanomachy. That war lasted 10 years and was fought between roughly matched armies. This was a single god, recently recovered from divine paralysis, against the creature that had already beaten him once. Hesiod describes the sea boiling, the land shaking, the sky cracking across its full width. Zeus threw his thunderbolts not as targeted weapons, but as terrain. He burned mountain ranges into slag. He cauterized sections of the sea into steam. Typhon responded with fire from his 100 heads, filling the sky with it, turning the Mediterranean basin into a forge operating at a scale no human smithing metaphor could hold. The sources diverge on the geography of the decisive moment. Pindar's first Pythian ode, written approximately 2,500 years ago, places it above Sicily. The Homeric material points to the Arima, a region the ancient Greeks located somewhere between Cilicia and Syria. Nonnus of Panopolis, writing in the 4th century AD and preserving much older oral tradition, turns it into a war that moves across the entire known world before its conclusion. What every source agrees on is the method. Zeus drove Typhon into the earth, not killed, driven in. Zeus took the volcanic mass of what would become Mount Etna in Sicily, a mountain that had been erupting for more than 500,000 years before any Greek ever saw it, and pressed its full weight down onto Typhon like a seal pressing into wax. The eruptions of Etna, in the Greek cosmological framework, were Typhon's fire still burning underground. The tremors were Typhon still fighting. Every time the volcano shook, Typhon was attempting to escape. He never succeeded, but he never stopped. In the Greek world, that distinction was not minor. Etna stands at the center of the ancient Greek colonial zone in the western Mediterranean. The Greeks who built cities across Sicily and southern Italy, Magna Graecia, a civilization that at its peak would surpass Athens in wealth, lived next to this myth. They felt it under their feet. They heard it in the dark. Their word for what Etna was doing was not a geological description. It was a theological one. Order requires maintenance. Olympus is not a permanent condition. It is the current outcome of a process that can, and once did, fail. Typhon under Etna is not a solved problem. It is a managed one. Zeus understood this. The Greeks who built their temples above active geology understood it. The mountain keeps him, for now. Typhon was buried, if buried is the right word for something that cannot be killed. The deeper consequence of his myth is not what happened to him. It is what he left. With Echidna, described in the Theogony as half woman and half serpent, immortal, dwelling in a cave beneath the earth, feeding on raw flesh, Typhon fathered what the Greeks called the full population of monstrosity. Not several creatures, all of them. The catalogue is specific, and the specificity matters. Cerberus, the three-headed dog who guards the entrance to the underworld and prevents the dead from returning, Typhon's son. The Lernaean Hydra, the water serpent whose heads regenerate when severed. The second labor of Heracles, Typhon's daughter. The Chimera, breathing fire, composed of lion and goat and serpent, terrorizing the kingdom of Lycia, Typhon's child. The Sphinx, who sat outside the gates of Thebes and killed every traveler, who could not answer her riddle, whose riddle brought down Oedipus's father before Oedipus solved it, Typhon's daughter. The Nemean lion, whose skin no weapon could pierce, the first labor of Heracles, Typhon's offspring. By some accounts, the eagle that ate Prometheus's liver daily for 30,000 years was also Typhon's. Every labor of Heracles was partly a campaign against Typhon's bloodline. Every Greek hero who faced a monster was, by extension, continuing the work Zeus began at Etna. The Greeks did not scatter their monsters across random origins. They built a single family tree and placed Typhon at its root. This was deliberate mythological architecture. It carries a specific argument. Chaos has a lineage. The violence that persists in the world, the hydra that cannot be simply killed, the sphinx that keeps asking, is Typhon's continuation, not in fire, in his children. Olympian order is not a condition. It is a process, a constant reiteration of dominance over the things that came before it, expressed through the bodies of the heroes who keep defeating what Typhon fathered. Mount Etna erupted in 396 BC. The Greeks recorded it as Typhon stirring beneath the mountain. At the same moment, Carthage devastated Himera, a Sicilian city that had stood for over a century without ever being sacked. The timing struck them as cosmologically legible. The mountain moved when the order built above it cracked. They were not being superstitious. They were reading the world in the language they had built for it, a language in which what happens above ground and what burns below it are the same story, told from different altitudes. Typhon is still there, the mountain is still above him, the fire is still his, not whether order holds, only for how long.